The February 13th, 2023 regular Wasilla City Council meeting is called to order. The time is 6 p.m. Before we begin, council, please put away cell phones. If you've got personal business to attend to during the meeting, please move for a recess. If you're participating telephonically, please mute your phone unless speaking. Also, when speaking, please state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder to all attendees, the meeting is being streamed live. The camera is located directly in the back of the council chambers above the clock. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Brown is absent and excused unless there's objection from the body. I do expect him telephonically, so he may end up chiming in. Councilmember Vlock.
Here.
Councilmember Rubeo.
Here.
You do have a quorum, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, Graham, Vlock, and Rubeo are with us in person. Councilmember Johnson is telephonic.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Councilmember Rubeo, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item of business is approval of the agenda. Are there changes to the agenda? Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the agenda stands as approved. We are now at commission and agency reports. We'll begin with a report from Burchell High School. Apparently, they are not here tonight.
Is Wasilla here?
Huh?
Do we have Wasilla High School here?
We will move on to the Matsu Conservation Services presentation. Catherine Inman, please come forward to present your report on Nunley Park and Lake Lucile Watershed.
Thank you. So, should I be speaking into the mic?
Yes, please.
Introducing myself. Actually, my name is Catherine Cheadle. I was here in front of this group 2 years ago as Catherine Inman. I got married. But I am the owner of a small local consulting business, Matsu Conservation Services, and I mainly do salmon stream habitat, youth hands-on projects, and other kinds of natural resource education and planning. And I'm also delighted to be here with our project partner, Ashley Alexek, who's a program manager with the Department of Environmental Conservation, who funded this. It's called the Aqua Grant, Alaska Clean Water Actions. And not here tonight is my business partner, Luann Erfer at Sustainable Design Group. She's a landscape architect, so she does the design work, and I help with the coordination and the outreach parts on the ground. We have a contracting partner as well, Exico, who's a construction company out at Talkeetna. And of course, the City of Wasilla Public Works Department. So we always want to thank Eric and also Robert, who have provided immeasurably huge amounts of support and materials and guidance, and just been a great home for us as we've worked on this project. So, without further ado, this is a stormwater management project. As I fumble with the on button.
On the side.
Side.
Oh, let me.
Okay. Aren't you guys glad you're not the one with the button up here, right? All right.
There you go.
Okay. So the big picture is the DEC collects water quality data, and if certain thresholds of pollutants of concern are exceeded statewide, water bodies can be named as impaired, and Lake Lucile is. Polluted stormwater runoff mainly. And every year every 2 years actually, they come out with a 2-year grant of different actions to help address some of that. So this Lake Lucile grant project is aimed at stormwater management. And 2 recent planning actions that have been identified in the Lake Lucile Management Plan that we'll talk about in a second. We're creating a demonstration of green infrastructure you may have heard of, which is using natural plants and a little more long-range planning. Gray infrastructure would be like your storm sewers, things with concrete that are actually gray, address the problem effectively, but may actually cost a lot more to maintain. Green infrastructure is using a little bit different approach. So at Nunley Park, we've installed a demonstration that I'm going to have a lot of fun showing you some pictures of and telling the story. The other prong of this is conducting public outreach. What is stormwater? What's a Lake Lucile management plan? What's with those ponds that I did at Park anyway? They're actually a stormwater feature that has a really cool function, helping take water out of downtown Wasilla. Who knew? We just think of it as duck pond, but there are always other stories back behind it. So we do have 2 signs back behind us. There were 4 produced, as you'll see, and Ashley and I, and maybe anyone else interested in going out and having a cup of hot chocolate and working a little bit of a hammer in the next couple weeks, we will be installing these in the park. So this is just really fun timing that we get to show off the final project tonight. Okay, we have a lot of plans and plans. And what makes this project distinguished is that we're having demonstrations of how to do some of these green infrastructure, or called low-impact development techniques. So there are overall borough plans, watershed plans, and basically they outline different approaches that we can take to keeping clean water. So we've just picked off a couple of different activities that have been identified under the Lake Lucile Management Plan. So what is low-impact development? It's called bioengineering, as I referred to, using plants. And there are just an awful lot of benefits for clean water parks. We're using these techniques all over Alaska. It can save money long-term, and also just ties into a lot of the habitat values, recreation values, cultural heritage preservation values as well. That's a whole nother field that we could get into, but one demonstration. Here's the area with Lake Lucile, and do I have a pointer? No, that's okay. No problem. You guys can see what's going on here. Of course, obviously, Lake Lucile. You can see the Parks Highway coming through here. Up at the top there with the arrows in it is I did a park with the 3 different stormwater catchments. So slow it down, spread it out, and soak it in is one motto for catching stormwater. And using these basins, they actually, you'll notice, they fill up right after a big storm event. And they're engineered to catch overflow, one after the other, moving over towards the west there. And that's catching water that's coming off of the whole road system, parking lots, rooftops even, everything that's not hitting something vegetated or that's open gravel. Anything that hits pavement has to end up collecting somewhere. And those stormwater ponds are just a really interesting catchment. Yes?
Just a quick question through the mayor, just a quick question. So I understand the storm drainage in these particular areas. Is there anything closer than to the Parks Highway where it would have a direct impact from where these particular subdivisions are right on the lake, since you've highlighted this particular area of the lake?
That is a great question. You can see a little more vegetation south of the highway. There are 2 triangle-shaped parcels that we actually did preliminary assessment on for future projects as part of this project. I'm just giving the little 10-minute overview. Right next to the highway. I'm going to look at Ashley for a second. What were those called? The 2 parcels?
I think they were being examined as part of the new Main Street project. But
Okay.
I don't know which.
Potentially as part of the new Main Street project, but there are 2 parcels that are catching runoff and sediment and any kind of pollutants right off the Parks Highway, where there's almost no buffer between the lake itself and the highway. So those are areas of concern, and there are a lot of other places that have been identified and that are becoming identified. This little rectangle up at the top is Nunley Park.
Pointer's at the top. I didn't want to. See it there at the, yep, is that working?
No. That's okay, you guys can bear with me. I'll just keep on moving. Yeah, I know we don't have a whole lot of time. So we focused on Nunley Park to begin with. A lot of parking lot runoff, and this is a great picture of Ashley in the springtime looking at just this sort of, gross little strip next to the parking area. It's the kind of stuff that I park next to all the time and I don't really think about. But this is a great spot to be doing a demonstration of how we can actually be soaking it in and creating a more attractive feature and more value for the park. And also tying it in with that larger system. So as I've said before, we had a lot of different partners. We also did work with Burchell students to get them to come out. They've got a teacher, Rochelle Shreves over there, who's real active in biology and taking different field trips, environmental science, and she had her students do some stormwater exercises and come on a couple field trips. Of course, here's the whole team on the left there. We've got Public Works, Robert Walden, Luann Erfer there is on the right. That larger picture, that's Charlie Moses from Exigo Construction. So here's what a design plan looks like, which is why I need a landscape architect as a partner. I have basic computer skills, but I do not have this kind of level. What a landscape architect does for the land is what an architect does for a building. So it includes a lot more than just even designing a piece of a park. We're looking at the drainage down beneath. My personal background, I'm a geologist. I'm a geomorphologist, which is landform, so I'm a big drainage nerd. I love this. What's really happening in, say, a rain garden is what's going on underneath the ground, how that water flows and how that drainage is being filtered by the living plants and actually carried away from the ponding areas. So that's the exciting part, but she has a lot of skill there. With the construction, that was quite a bit. We had quite a lot of great input from Public Works on how to get exactly the right drainage underneath. And I don't have a picture of the beehive or just the different technical features that went into this, but this is several feet underground that we've gone back and then backfilled with the correct kind of strata. And the city was tremendously helpful. We had a challenge on planting day in mid-June, which was that the top of it wasn't quite graded the right way for the water flow and for the plants that we needed. In fact, the topsoil wasn't quite deep enough. And Bob went to heroics through, this is Lindy Rock on the left, who's an employee of DEC. We sprung her loose from the office for the day, got permission from her supervisors. She happened to know Bob, who happened to know a local company who happened to have a load of topsoil that we could happen to get within an hour that morning. This is our community of Wasilla snapping together. Yeah. Every project has one of these, right? So that was our fun that day, and K&H Civil Constructors really came and saved the day. But if not for knowing the person that knew the person that could solve the problem, that's how it goes. So we ended up with quite a few yards of lovely topsoil, got the grading and everything figured out just right, and I was satisfied. Had great planting. One thing that Eric was saying, you might get questions about maintenance. Yes, green infrastructure or low impact development relies heavily on native plants, locally sourced cheaper materials, and materials that aren't going to require a lot of maintenance or fertilizer. We've got a maintenance plan with the city, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But a lot of these are just, this is Ashley on the right, my favorite picture ever. She's just dug up this enormous fern. I don't even know how she could dig this thing or carry this thing. But that's my backyard. We do also go to a lot of local nurseries. Big shout out to Aurora Nurseries up in Palmer. They give a discount for public projects like this, especially when students are involved. So we're using things like dogwoods and irises, rose bushes, nice and thorny, but things that are already out in our Alaskan climate and can survive being wet, being frozen, being dried. So it cuts down on maintenance a lot. And of course with volunteers, that's cost match, which our grant funders enjoy. Then we've got a planting plan. And, so you can get as detailed as you want, or you can see like on the left, we're sort of eyeballing where things go, but trying to make it attractive, putting taller things towards the back. And on planting day, we pulled in lots of community volunteers and just made a really fun, long day of it. So again, with the maintenance, of course, in June there was watering, and by July, we were getting rained on this summer. So the watering was not a problem, but actually we had some extra ponding of it. You can see kind of on the left there, it was ponding up. So we've got Laura Eldred, who also works at DEC and is one of the grants managers and has been doing this kind of thing and guiding it for many years. She helped us to engineer just a couple of little drainage kind of swales and then backfill with some nice rock. So we've got features that look good, but they're actually siphoning that water from ponding on the parking lots, which, as you can see on the right, is pretty gross. So if we can get that water off the parking lot, get it into the vegetated area, these plants actually do filter some of that oil and gunk and sediment and naturally clean it. So here we are to interpretation. I know you have a lot on your agenda tonight, so I'm kind of zooming through. This sign is actually right back there, and within a couple weeks, Ashley and I hope to get this installed at Nunley. And 2 at Idita Park, and 1 at that beautiful little lake park at Carter Park. So this just gives more information on the purpose of the project.
Simon Brown
has joined.
Right.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah. And it gives reference to some of the project partners so that people can ask questions or have some contact, or at least know who all's been involved in boosting this. And here's a nice one for Carter Park. And Luann's also a real artist. She did a wonderful job with these signs, and Ashley and Laura helped with a lot of heavy editing and suggestions. So we're hoping this will be a nice feature. You know, families go and take picnics at Carter Park and so on. And this can just give a nice background for the city to be welcoming the public as well. Can't get away without the duck picture at Carter Park. And the Idita Park stormwater ponds. It's just an interesting feature that these are actually stormwater drainage catchment basins, as well as being really cool, pretty ponds when they fill with water. I know for many years Cheadle Middle School students have planted iris and larch and paid a lot of attention, especially at the upper ends. So it's just kind of a nice extension of that to get some attractive interpretation signs and help people understand how that's part of the larger watershed management plan. So, current status, now we've got a demonstration site. It is functioning as a proper biocell, as designed, and siphoning some polluted runoff from that parking lot. With some attractive signs and just getting the public a little more engaged with management at Idita Park. Of course, acknowledgements to all of our funders and partners at DEC, City of Wasilla, and our local companies. And with that, I'll welcome any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Grave.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Catherine. Very informative presentation there. So, when Fred Meyer was built, of course we're going back a few weeks now, but when Fred Meyer was built, there was sober concern about runoff from the parking lot, going untreated into the lake. And so a large catch basin or something was built, nothing this elaborate, but I mean, a lot of gravel, a lot of, ability to filter some of the runoff from the parking lot before it got to the lake to keep some of the pollutants out of there. And then when Target was built, I don't recall a similar project happening. Now here in Wasilla, we currently have a landscape ordinance committee, or I don't even know what they call it, landscape committee, to try and figure out what the rules ought to be for landscaping when people come in. Have you talked to that landscaping committee at all to
I've not talked
discuss
directly
stormwater?
with that committee. I would imagine they're aware of the Lake Lucile Management Plan and the Borough Stormwater Plan. I do know those projects you're referring to with Fred Meyer's and with Target. And there is a green belt strip. I think there are talks with the city about park development. I'm not up to speed on that one, but there is a green area along Cottonwood Creek.
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
They
my
did
company
develop a
also
park
worked
there.
a little bit along that bike bridge back behind where the Alaska Club is, where Johnson Tire used to be. So your public works department helped tremendously using Teelan Middle School kids, and we actually got some beautiful salmon artwork in on those rails from Holly Gitline. So, yes, those are excellent points. I don't know where that committee's work status is at, or where you may or may not have some ordinances, but
To your,
that's important work.
to your knowledge.
This is a very small demonstration at Nunley compared to, say, what Fred Meyer's had to
Right.
install as part of their building permits.
But to your knowledge, there's really not any requirement from the city of Wasilla for developers to manage runoff?
I'm not an expert on what the city's requirements would be, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Is there any more questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Good night.
And lastly, the city attorney Wells will report on ordinance serial number 23-05.
Did Holly call in?
Mayor,
Oh, there she is.
this is Holly. I'm here. Would you like me to just provide some comments to the council?
Okay?
Okay, so one of the things I discovered in preparing for tonight's meeting, and I'm just going to warn you, there's a significant echo on the phone, so if you have difficulty understanding me, let me know.
Speaker.
Holly, are you on speakerphone?
No, I'm not.
Using headphones.
Are you using a headphone set?
Nope, I am not.
Okay.
She's not too bad.
I can hear her.
Yeah, she's not
Okay.
too bad. Yeah. She's good.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, as long as you're not hearing the echo on your end, I can try to focus through it.
Okay,
Do you not hear it? Okay.
you're good.
Okay, so in preparing for our presentation tonight, I was working through questions from council, and there did seem to be a lot of interest in the scope of the Sex Offender Registration Act in Alaska and what that process looks like. And so I delved into the hearing process. This hearing process was mandated by the Alaska Supreme Court in 2019. And it's this hearing process that ensures any ordinance we adopt is aimed at individuals that are that pose a significant danger to the public. However, unfortunately, because the court case came out in 2019, and I'm guessing in part due to COVID and a lot of the delays that resulted, there is no fully implemented hearing process quite yet. So we see some legislation coming, or at least being discussed this session, that suggests the state is working towards that goal, but they just have not quite attained it. For that reason, I would recommend that council postpone the ordinance and then revisit it when that hearing process has been fully implemented.
Okay,
Madam Mayor?
Colleen.
Thank you. Holly, it's unfortunate that this just came before us today, which makes it really difficult for us to really make an informed decision on something that's really crucial, I think, for the state of Alaska. And for the city of Wasilla, we've been working on this ordinance for months. Neighborhoods have been voicing their concern for years. So when I had the minute today, which was difficult for me due to my health, but I had to look through a 48-page piece from the Supreme Court ruling from 2019. And I understand what their opinion was. I understand how it is that they came to their decision. But they had an individual who had committed a heinous crime in Virginia, moved up to Alaska, and then decided he didn't want to be registering on the sex offender registry just because he didn't feel like he had to, which makes it difficult. He came up here and all of a sudden decides he doesn't want to follow our laws, our statutes. So based on what the Supreme Court found, they found that this gentleman's liberty was at risk, that constitutionality that you talk about, his freedom to be here, to be employed, to live, and not have his sexual offender registry be reported or out in public view. On the other side of that, what I could glean also was the state of Alaska was arguing the point that public safety came first and foremost, in some instances, above someone's liberty. And I think that was the argument that I kind of gleaned onto most. And also, I did look under the Department of Public Safety for our state troopers and the sexual offender registry. They still follow the same law that came through in 2013. So, it's been 4 years since the ruling from the Supreme Court came through. The state troopers are still following the existing law that's in statute because statute hasn't been changed. The Alaska State Legislature has not changed statute at all for whatever the Supreme Court wanted. City of Wasilla Police, they still follow the same rules that were there prior because they haven't received notification legally that they need to make any changes. So I'm really hesitant to make changes right now and just throw our ordinance in the trash. We worked on this for a long time, and now you want us to postpone it indefinite based on what the legislature may or may not do to follow what the Supreme Court has stated they wish to have happen. So what do you want us to do? I mean, this makes it really difficult for council. We're the lawmakers. I'm not an attorney. So I understand your position, but for me, I'm a lawmaker and I represent my residents, my citizens.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, when it's an appropriate time, I do want to address some of the facts you raised in the case. Because there are some differences. I don't know if they'll impact you, but at least I want to make sure you have all that information.
Please enlighten me.
Okay, so one thing to note is there were two aspects of the Doe versus Department of Public Safety case. And one of those was that you had this individual that had come from outside Alaska and was challenging the application of our registration requirements to him. In regard to that, the Alaska Supreme Court found that Alaska is not barred from applying it and subjecting new arrivals in Alaska to our registration requirements. The other component that the court focused on was that the registry in the state of Alaska is very broad. So there's a large spectrum of different crimes that require registry. And so their determination was before you put somebody on the registry, which is for some crimes 15 years, for others up to life, and for repeat offenders, life registration, that you needed to provide, the state of Alaska needed to provide, in order to comply with our right to privacy under the Alaska Constitution, a hearing. And in that hearing, they would have an opportunity to demonstrate that they no longer pose a significant risk to the public. So the existence of that hearing, in which the state of Alaska went through the steps to provide the due process that would result in all individuals on the registry being individuals that pose a significant danger to the public, was the justification, in my legal opinion, for our ordinance. And so that hearing really allows us, or allows the city of Wasilla, to demonstrate that the acts it's taking, the actions that it's taking, the limitations on individual rights and privacy rights is justified because the city of Wasilla has a compelling interest in protecting the public from that risk. I don't know if that helps, but that is, legally speaking, that is why waiting for the hearing process to be fully implemented would be my legal recommendation.
One last follow-up.
And I will apologize for the fact that we did not know about the hearing process or that it hadn't been fully implemented until later in our research. The truth is, for our purposes, I don't have much concern or interest in what the hearing process looks like. I just want to make sure that it's been implemented. And I was, surprised to find that it hadn't, because this decision was 5 years ago. But I'm guessing, based on the legislation coming before the legislature right now, they're just working on getting certain pieces in place before they do so.
So just a quick follow-up on that. I haven't seen any pieces of legislation regarding that, so if you can direct me in what bill you're referring to, I would appreciate that. I guess my thoughts are it's taken them 4 years to even have it be brought before the legislature for even consideration. Couldn't we put a clause in our ordinance that if it passed, that when state law changed, then it could be brought back before the council for consideration to bring it up to date once statute has been changed?
I think that it's better to wait to implement it until there's a hearing process, because in the meantime, the city council does not have a basis in order to determine which individuals pose a significant risk to the public. And for that reason, that's why I would recommend waiting, because that hearing really does that for the city of Wasilla.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Councilperson Sullivan Leonard and Attorney Wells. So currently, the state of Alaska has a penal code which allows for someone to be determined to be a sexual offender. And it says persons that are convicted of those offenses, and there is a pretty significant list, says that persons convicted of those offenses pose a danger to society. It doesn't say may pose a danger to society, it says pose a danger to society. And when I look at the sexual offender registry list, which I pulled up here, if I can get this iPad to turn back on, it's only 57 pages long. 57 pages of names and addresses of persons convicted of sexual offenses in the state of Alaska, or persons who have were convicted in other states and were required to register here in the state of Alaska. So I don't find that your privacy concerns really hold any water. I mean, I know who these people are. I know where they live. What more privacy can you be concerned about? They have a right to live their life. They have a right to have a job if an employer doesn't require them not to be on the list. They have a right to pursue an education. I don't understand your concern about a right to privacy. The Supreme Court, when reviewing this, didn't say anything in their, I think it was almost 50 pages or so, opinion that I looked through after we got this memorandum today. I don't remember them saying anything about we have to shield sexual offenders from the eyes of the public. It would be different if we were to put a sign out in front of their house that said, be careful, a sexual offender lives here. That would be, probably invading their privacy according to the Alaska Supreme Court. But the fact that the Supreme Court held that the sexual offender registry in its current form is just fine leads me to think that your argument, or that your interest in protecting the privacy of persons who pose a danger to society as determined by the judicial system in the state of Alaska, I don't understand that privacy concern. Maybe you could expand on that for me?
Sure, of course. Well, first let me say that this is not my opinion on the constitutional right to privacy. It is absolutely the Alaska Supreme Court. I mean, they were very clear that there is a constitutional right to privacy, that it is a very protected right, and that the state of Alaska, by putting people on a registry without providing them a hearing to get off that registry, violated their right to privacy. And one of the reasons why the court found that is, and they gave a very detailed list of the crimes associated with registration. And they emphasized that, it covered everything from murder to relationships between consensual adolescents separated by as little as 3 years of age. It covered sexting, where sometimes there's no age difference at all. And that really, for the court, made a difference. And while the city of Wasilla may want to subject, all registered sex offenders to limitations on their residency, our right to live somewhere, or the prohibition against doing that, is a fundamental right of privacy in our state. Now, that said, this ordinance was drafted in a way to be very narrowly tailored between the city council's goals and objectives and the protections of its public. But when the state is not holding the hearing, and we have the Alaska Supreme Court saying that failing to hold that hearing is violating the right to privacy, puts the city of Wasilla directly in a very vulnerable legal position. And I do believe that when that hearing is in place, that vulnerability would be substantially reduced. But I don't know if that helps. I did want to also add, just for Councilmember Sullivan Leonard's comment, I think it's Senate Bill 168. And what they're doing is, in that bill, is they're ensuring that victims of sex offenders have an opportunity and notice regarding those hearings.
If I may follow up, Madam Mayor. So, Ms. Wells, if this right to privacy that you talk about, which I don't see, of course, I'm not an attorney, thank goodness I talk enough already. But if this right to privacy exists, why then are every month new persons added to the sexual offender registry list in the state of Alaska, if this is some sort of violation of their right to privacy? People are still committing crimes. People are still being, having their day in court, so to speak, and people are still being judged to be guilty of offenses which put them on the sexual offender registry list, which is available to anybody with a computer, or you can actually go to the courthouse and get a physical copy of the list if you like. So I fail to see how the city of Wasilla, acting to protect its citizens from persons who pose a danger to society as determined by the judicial system in the state of Alaska, puts us at some sort of unreasonable risk or makes us out to be some sort of a monster. We're simply using the information the state has given us and the state has determined to be valid to perhaps place restrictions on how close a person can live to a school or a park or a daycare or perhaps some other concerns there. How can your firm say that we're exposing ourselves, I would assume, to litigation because we are enforcing the law that is on the books?
So, Councilmember Graham, one thing I would say is we're not enforcing a law that's on the books, because if we were doing that, we would be preempting the state's power and authority, and that is not something we can do, right? So what we are doing is not punitive. It is a land use-based regulation, and that's a very important distinction as we move forward. But what I am saying is that the Alaska Supreme Court in 2019 looked at the registry of sex offenders and said that it violated the Alaska's constitutional right to privacy. And I want to just be very clear, this is a constitutional right that is not in question in the state of Alaska. It very much exists. We have significant case precedent that demonstrate that. And it was a right that the court put into place specifically regarding the population that the city is considering regulating. So, and one of the things that I think we need to focus on is it's not that the council should, I don't recommend that you postpone the ordinance forever. I mean, I recommend that you postpone it indefinitely, and then when the hearing process mandated by the Alaska Supreme Court is put into place, then the city of Wasilla can bring forward that ordinance and consider it in a manner that I believe would result in a lawful regulation.
So in the opinion of your legal firm, the city should do nothing to protect itself or to protect its citizens from these persons who pose a danger to society and are well known to pose a danger to society to the state of Alaska.
So, Councilmember Graham, I want to read you a small excerpt from the case. What the court said was, surely not all offenders present a significant danger to the public. Yet the statute currently deprives all offenders, including those who present no danger to the community and are not likely to recidivate, of these interests automatically for life. Therefore, persons convicted of crimes listed under the statute who do not pose a significant danger to the community are at substantial risk of being erroneously deprived of their liberty interests. So for that reason, the court made a determination, and the state is in the process of complying with their direction. What I am saying is we wait until the state adopts the due process and the constitutional practices that are Alaska Supreme Court mandated before we become the first municipality in the state of Alaska to impose the residency requirements that we are considering. So that's all I'm proposing. Now, council may choose to move forward with the ordinance, and I understand that that may be where you go, but I do want to be clear that my legal opinion is that doing so would not be recommended and would create significant vulnerability for the city.
So one last question, Ms. Wells, is anything that you have just said in public here, would any of that be considered confidential? Anything that we should not discuss outside of council?
Well, I think the nature of the questions posed by council have definitely led to a very comprehensive discussion today. And so I do think that, you know, it's very interesting with government clients, the city council basically, as a body, has the attorney-client privilege. It lies with you as a body. And so to the extent you waive that privilege and we engage in discussions regarding the legality of ordinances and provisions considered by council, then it's very appropriate that that be public.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Mayor?
Ms. Vlock?
Now, I know when we were discussing this ordinance and putting it together, we were under the impression that these people on this sex offender list already had an opportunity to prove they were no longer a danger to society. Because there was a process, we thought it had already been in effect, that there was a process that they could go through to prove that. And what I understand Ms. Wells is saying is that never happened, that legislation. So these people, they're on the list and there's really no way of getting off of it, is what I'm understanding. And if we wait and do it the way Holly is suggesting, then these offenders do have that opportunity to get off that list. And am I understanding, Holly, that at this point they really don't have a hearing to get off the list? So that's why we're kind of stuck?
That's exactly right. Like when we moved forward with the ordinance, we were looking at the fact that the registry list now had a hearing process that allowed individuals to get off of that list. And in turn, that allowed the city of Wasilla to comfortably say, these land use regulations we're adopting are directly aimed at individuals that the state of Alaska has found pose a significant risk to the public. And so that piece was a really important piece. And I do think that that piece might be why there is no municipality in the state of Alaska that has taken this step. Because prior to 2019, the constitutionality of such an action was very questionable. So the hope is that the hearing process will be adopted fairly quickly, that they are working on those procedures, and then council can consider this ordinance substantively on its face. And I will, as the attorney, be able to advise you that the ordinance is lawful.
Thank you, Holly. And also, Holly, now I understand there's 3 levels of sex offenders, and there's the first level where they're nonviolent and it didn't involve a minor, and then level 2 and 3 are the ones more considered a danger to the public. Is that what you understand? I'm thinking, is it possible maybe we could work with level 1s, or I don't know. How do you understand that?
Well, I think that one of the difficult things is we are not the state of Alaska, so we don't deal with enforcing these provisions and managing sex offenders and charging the various levels of a sexual assault, for example. And for that reason, the city would have to, in order to parse through what crime could be seen as unquestionably resulting in a significant risk to the public, we would actually have to have a system to parse through those. Because, and I'll give you an example. A kidnapping charge can be brought against a person who absolutely poses a significant risk to the public, or a parent who is the victim of domestic assault who flees the state temporarily with their child. And so that would be a crime, I think, in most cases you would include in your list and target, but I'm not sure that we would be seen as appropriate in doing so by the state of Alaska.
Thank you, Holly.
Colleen?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Holly, you said it was Senate Bill, is it Senate Bill 60 or House Bill 160 that you referred to? Is that the vehicle?
Senate Bill 168.
Okay, and that's the vehicle we're looking at then presently to pass through 2 or 3 committees of referral, pass the legislature, and then be implemented maybe this year, maybe next, we don't know. Is that kind of where we're at?
I mean, I think that's where we are. You know, because this isn't our process, I'm afraid to be overly definitive and mislead the council. What I can tell you is I have called the state of Alaska and have emails and phone calls in, and I'm waiting to hear more. It is possible they're further along than we know. You know, but what we know right now is they have no statute or regulation that is currently effective. And I went through all of their forms, looked for any sort of small print that might suggest there's a more informal hearing procedure, and could not find anything. But that said, we are still trying to get that information.
Okay, I did call the governor's office today to speak to the legislative director, and did get a little bit of information from her staff just with regard to what they're working on, but I didn't see how it pertained to what you've referred with regard to the House bill. But I guess my other opinion on this, and not a question, Holly, just an opinion, is, you know, when you pull up the sex offender registry, you're able to see for that individual that has registered, especially within the city of Wasilla proper, you can see where they live, their employer's address, and then also below that they have the information pertaining to what they were charged with and the outcome of that. So, you know, you can pretty quickly see the severity or not of what the sexual offense was. And I hate to take away that tool, if you will, for mothers, family, anybody else that's interested in how their neighborhood is growing, and also for land use planning, especially with what we have before us here. A sixplex that has 6 sex offenders in a residential neighborhood is highly concerning for the neighbors. It's concerning for us. And to have that tool taken away from us, I think is really just not good governing from state side or from our side. So anyway, thanks, Holly.
And Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, one thing I would add, and it wouldn't be in the same character as this ordinance that's before council right now, but we could revisit it and build a administrative procedure by which we're identifying the crimes that warrant and pose a significant risk to the public. But my worry with that is that we will then truly enter sort of the criminal law realm and on the state front, but we can explore it. You know, I don't know the answer to that without first seeing the exact parameters of our determination.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Mr. Brown?
Yes. I did hear I believe to understand most of what's being said, but I didn't hear Holly implying that we should slash this ordinance or take away any privileges to citizens. What my understanding is, we're just trying to delay and make sure we got all the information and see what else is going on in the state of Alaska. And with the AG not weighing in on this, I think that's good advice. Maybe I didn't hear everything, but I don't think we're trying to throw this away. We're just taking a pause here and looking at all the evidence that's out there.
Madam Mayor,
Sorry.
this is Chief Johnson.
Mr. Johnson?
A point of order. Has this ordinance been moved and seconded for council discussion, or are we just talking and questioning the material witnessing public hearing?
This is just the city attorney Wells.
Thank you.
Ms. Rubio?
Madam Mayor, thank you. So I actually propose that we do indefinitely postpone this in the regards of, I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions and that we need to be patient with it. And I'm not a judge. And I feel like I don't want to ever judge people. They're already on the sex offender list. They've done the crime, paid the price. Now they're trying to recover. I don't like the map of the yellow parts, and that's trying to regulate where they need to live. Because looking at that yellow map, or looking at the yellow spots, like what are we filtering them all into one location then? It's out of our backyard into another backyard. I just think that there's way too much of us trying to control something that has already went through a system. We just need to be patient to see what the next step of that is. And we don't have that answer. And so
If that's a motion, I second it.
it is.
It's, Mr. Brown, it's not a motion.
Not yet.
Not yet.
That's it. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in response to Councilperson Rubio, I would say that they have been determined, been adjudged guilty by the state of Alaska. They have done some sort of penalty, but a part of that penalty is to be on this list from 5 years to life. I mean, that's part of doing the time.
Mr. Graham, excuse me, but we're not going to debate this. This is your questioning Attorney Wells, not your fellow councilman.
I just wanted to correct the record since she was allowed to go off that. But thank you. And thank you, Councilperson Rubio, for bringing that up.
Further questions for Holly? Hearing none, thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
We are now at public participation, public hearing. There's one ordinance scheduled for public hearing. Madam Clerk, please read the title of the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That is ordinance serial number 2305, amending Wasilla Municipal Code Title 9, Public Peace and Welfare by adding Chapter 910, sex offenders, to prohibit registered sex offenders from establishing permanent residency within 1,000 feet of schools, daycare facilities, and public parks after the effective date of this ordinance, and to prohibit supervised housing programs from housing sex offenders in residential zoning districts.
The public hearing on ordinance serial number 23-05 is open. Anyone who would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Todd Stafford, city resident since 1996. The packet for this measure was 150 pages long, and I'm sure you all did your due diligence to read it carefully, but in case you didn't get a chance, I would like to read selected parts of it. The first part is from the Federal Probation Journal, and I'm just going to quote random sections to try and use as much of my 3-minute time as I can. A Kentucky judge opined that resident restrictions are clearly punitive and that to argue otherwise is intellectually dishonest. He added that such laws are minimal at best and completely illusionary at worst, and that they appear to do little more than political placebo, offering false comfort to pacify the public's fear. Minnesota DOC study in 2007, the results showed that not one of the 224 inmates' cases likely would have been deterred by residency restrictions. These results indicate that the prevailing factor in sexual recidivism is not residential proximity, but rather social or relationship proximity. The authors concluded that the potential deterrent effects of a residence restriction law would likely be marginal at best because of the type of offenses it is designed to prevent are exceptionally rare. Another Minnesota DOC study from 2003 tracked 329 offenders considered the highest risk, and of those, only 4% had been rearrested for a new sex crime 4 years later. It was advised that blanket policies restricting where sex offenders can live are unlikely to benefit community safety. In Colorado, 130 sex offenders on probation were tracked for 15 months in 2004. The conclusion there was that residence restrictions are unlikely to deter sex offenders from recommitting sex crimes, and that such policies should not be considered as a feasible strategy for protecting children. There is also no research as yet that establishes residence restriction as a viable strategy for reducing sex crimes, preventing recidivism, or protecting children. Housing instability and criminal recidivism are clearly linked. Community connections and healthy interpersonal relationships create social and psychological reinforcements to the offender's investment in conformity and to crime deterrence. Lifestyle instability has been associated with both general and sexual recidivism, and sex offenders with constructive support systems have fewer violations. Let me skip to an Alaska study with my last 20 seconds. That went faster than I thought. In 97%, this is from Alaska, of reported felony sex offense instances, the victim knew the suspect. It wasn't a random stranger, it was someone that they knew. Overall, 2.4% of the incidents involved in a suspect that was a total stranger. For victims under 18, only 0.3 incidents involved a total stranger. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify? Please come forward and state your first and last name.
My name is Michelle Jacobson. When I found out a few hours ago that this new level came into this, it really altered what I had been working on. So the new information was learned after I wrote this, but what I was going to talk about tonight was going to be focusing on anyone in opposition of this ordinance, letting them know that if my research is correct, in the city of Wasilla, there isn't a sex offender currently living within 1,000 feet from a school, park, or daycare. This is simply preventative. If it did affect them, or if they were in that distance, they'd be grandfathered in. And then I did talk about the 2019 Alaska Supreme Court letting these men advocate for themselves, where if they shouldn't be on this list, then they wouldn't be on this list. As I said, that really changes what I have written tonight. I talked about not putting sex offenders in the same category with someone who struggles with a drug addiction. They shouldn't be treated the same. Our loved ones are many things, but they wouldn't sexually harm children. And then, to say that these restrictions don't do anything, that's inaccurate. One of the men living on my street just reoffended. Most of the men in that house that are sexual offenders, it was a child under the age of 13. This week I read a story about a man from Haines that the state of Alaska just sentenced to 20 years for sexually exploiting children and raping children. And when he gets out of jail, he can still have the right to buy a house wherever he would like right now in our community. I was going to talk about how many parents were not aware of this. Principals at the schools within the district were not aware. to state representatives' wives who were not aware. Also, I was going to talk about usually, Megan's Law, Sarah's Law, the Adam Welsh Act. Those are after children get sexually assaulted and then they are killed, that it makes these big headline news stories. I'm talking about the many children within the valley that are not killed after, and what kind of message does this send to them that we're not willing to put this extra tiny bump of protection between the park that they play in, the school that they play in, that they play at. One of the pie graphs on that packet that gentleman read showed you that, 0 to 6% or 0 to 6 age was a huge percentage. Those children can't read or write. Who's gonna protect them? It's really up to us.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move ordinance serial number 23-05.
Second by Councilman Graham.
It's been moved by Councilmember Sullivan Leonard and seconded by Councilmember Graham to move ordinance serial number 23-05. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Colleen?
Thank you. The ordinance that we have before us makes changes in the residential zoning clause for the city of Wasilla. Therefore, it gives guidelines for where those that are challenged with alcohol abuse or drug abuse or are sex offenders, where they may or may not reside. Part of the reasons why we looked at this and worked on this for several months is due to the concentration of how many sex offenders were registered within a residential neighborhood. And part of the concern I had was not so much with the difficulty with alcohol abuse or drug abuse, but it was that the third prong of sex offender. And so when we looked deeper into that, what you realized was that having children in a neighborhood and have it be where you're looking at how offenders of whether it's alcohol or drugs or what have you, they're looking for a place where they can reside in a family type atmosphere. And that worked for the first two types, and that's with the drug and the alcohol. But the third prong is the sex offense. The sex offense, when you put them in a neighborhood, it's the equivalent of putting somebody who's fighting alcohol or drugs into a housing unit that's right next to a bar. I mean, that type of temptation and that type of challenge would be difficult for anybody going through those type of treatments. Therefore, we worked with different neighborhoods. We worked with different groups, for example, the Children's Place and others who really did highly support what we were doing. They didn't come tonight because the word was such was that we were going to move this to postpone indefinite. I would ask the council not postpone it indefinite and that we move forward. And the reason why I say that is being in the legislature, it's fickle, and you never know when a bill is going to pass and when it's not going to pass. It's already been 4 years. The Department of Law has not moved any legislation or policy to change what they already have on the books with regard to sex offender registry. I think it's prudent on us to protect our neighborhoods. I think it's prudent on us to have policies in place where kids can feel that they can ride their bikes in a cul-de-sac and not have to be looking over their shoulder to see who's watching them. And if you think they're not watching them, they are. And there was proof positive on that when we had someone who lived there who then reoffended and got sent back to jail. And he was watching kids and he was soliciting them on the internet, all across social media. And so, again, as a city, we have to provide safety for our neighbors and our children as best as possible. And so I ask council to please support this. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councilperson Sullivan Leonard. And I couldn't agree more that an ordinance needs to be brought forward to protect what are truly the most vulnerable in our community. And as Ms. Jacobson so eloquently stated, you know, a lot of these crimes, a significant portion of these crimes are committed on children that can't read or write or don't have reasoning skills. You know, I mean, kids under 6. I mean, they are essentially unprotected unless they are with their parent or with a guardian in some sort of situation. Somehow the public thinks that sexual offenses are created by people. You know, a guy drives up in a white van and opens the door and grabs a kid, throws them inside. You know, that doesn't happen. You know, I mean, it may happen very, very, very occasionally, but that's not how sexual offenses happen. It happens much more like Councilperson Sullivan Leonard was describing, where someone in your neighborhood that has these inclinations, you know, watches the kids, figures out who's vulnerable, perhaps looks online and finds vulnerable children and makes things happen. There's nothing we can do about the online part of it, but there is something that we can do and we should do and we are charged with doing to protect the residents of the city of Wasilla and persons in the city of Wasilla, to protect the parents of children in Wasilla, to minimize the potential for these crimes to happen. This ordinance will not stop crime from happening. You know, I mean, that's unfortunate. This crime and other crimes are always going to happen, and that's why we need, a code of laws that is, thousands of volumes thick. But what we do have as a council is the opportunity to craft an ordinance that is reasonable as far as protecting the property rights of Alaska citizens and balancing that against the need to protect the safety of our residents and to protect the privacy rights. Or I still don't understand where that was coming from the attorney, but there is a balance there that can be done. Is this ordinance a reasonable method of doing that? I would say yes. I mean, I actually have several concerns about the ordinance. I brought many up at the last meeting that we had, which was a month ago, I think. It's been a while, and I was disappointed to not see them addressed by the attorney. But we need to do this, and I would submit to Councilperson Sullivan Leonard that perhaps the best way to move forward would be to form a committee working with some council members and the attorney, or to develop a committee of the whole as a standing agenda item for a couple of meetings where we can kind of hash all this out and then come up with amendments to the ordinance where the majority of the council feels comfortable moving forward. But I would agree with you, Councilperson Sullivan Leonard, that there is no need to delay. There is no SB 168. There is no SB 168. And that's according to the state of Alaska, the legislature's website. There is no HB 168. Okay? So whatever was being referred to has nothing to do with this ordinance and with this problem that we have in society. The city of Wasilla has a charge in front of it, has a problem that has been brought forward by citizens, a problem that has existed for years and years and years. Just because we haven't done anything about it doesn't mean that's the way to move forward. The way to move forward is to establish a policy consistent with the laws of the state of Alaska, which is what we're trying to do, and implement that policy. So I too would not recommend following the attorney's advice and postponing this indefinitely. But if Councilperson Sullivan Leonard would agree, I would like to see us, put an agenda item forward for, working group for the next several council sessions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Vila.
Madam Mayor?
I'm next, Tim. I am, totally for this ordinance. I want to protect our children. I am. Before we heard from the attorney today, I was voting yes, go. However, I thought the hearing procedures were in place, that these people would have a chance. I am not willing to open the city of Wasilla up for litigation at this point. We are not killing this, it's too important, but I think it's prudent that we wait. We haven't had it thus far. Us as parents and grandparents, watch your kids, especially if they're living right next door. But I really believe we need to do this in a way that doesn't open the city up for litigation. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Mayor and Council, I would like to address the concern raised by the person who spoke in opposition to the ordinance. He was quoting from a study in, I believe it was issued by Minnesota. I read the same report. He took
Mr. Johnson.
the summary
Mr.
and,
Johnson.
basically stated it. However, that report also had several other recommendations that were not included within our existing ordinance.
Mr. Johnson.
Therefore, I think, or I would support Councilman Graham's proposal that we do consider some additional work on this before we bring it to a vote. However,
Mr. Johnson.
We can hear him.
Piece of legislation.
He's got,
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, are you on speakerphone?
No, I'm not.
You're getting some feedback.
Yes, I understand. I have the very same problem with the attorney.
Is there further, Ms. Rubio?
No, I was just gonna say, I agree with Councilman Velock. I really do want to not kill this, but I want to postpone it for more answers. And really, I do trust our attorney, I do trust our team, and I feel like we're being a little premature, and we just need to be patient.
Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor, I request a 10-minute recess so I can confer with the clerk about a potential order.
Okay, it is 7:18 and we will come back on the record at 7:28.
Madam Mayor, I move to postpone this ordinance until time certain being the next regular meeting of the Wasilla City Council. Thank you.
Okay, we already have a motion on the floor,
This is in order.
so.
Mayor, this is Holly. I just would like to make one comment before the vote to clarify the legislative action at this point.
There hasn't been a second.
Madam Mayor, I'll second that. Excuse me, Holly.
Go ahead, Holly.
Okay, I just want to let the council know that it is Senate Bill 168, but it was introduced in the 2019-2020 year or session, and the last entries I saw were that they were sending it back to, work on some constitutionality components and to work on the rest. So I just want to make sure council knows that to extend that infrastructure.
They were for constitutionality and what? Was it clear?
Holly, they were doing the constitutionality of it, and what was the last?
I think one of the recommendations from the Attorney General was to look at changing the offenses addressed when it's on registry. You know, that led to requiring identification of an individual.
Restate that, Jamie.
Say that?
Yes.
Holly, Madam Mayor's asked that I restate it, and I believe what I heard you say was they sent it back to the AG to look at the offenses. Is that correct?
Yes, so there were two prongs from what I see, and I just read the minutes to be clear of the committee session, but they were looking at what a hearing looks at, what the procedure itself would look like, and
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, may I speak to the ordinance or to the motion?
Would you please restate your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My motion, as seconded by Councilperson Sullivan Leonard, was to postpone the ordinance to the next regular city council meeting, so postpone till time certain. And the reason that I would like to do that is at the last city council meeting, and I realize this has been a month or so ago, we did have a committee of the whole. We had a lot of discussion, had a lot of questions asked, and I was under the impression that our attorney was going to look into those questions and provide answers at this meeting. That did not happen because it was her recommendation that we postpone the ordinance indefinitely. So therefore, the questions have not been answered, and by postponing this ordinance to the next city council meeting gives us the opportunity to get those and other questions answered. Thank you.
Okay. The motion on the floor is to postpone to time certain at the next city council meeting, which will be the 27th. Be February the 27th, 6 p.m. So, you want to take a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Graham, did you want a committee of the whole as well?
Yes, I didn't realize that needed to be part of it.
Thank you. That's just for my own clarification. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard on the motion to postpone time certain February 27th.
Yes.
Councilmember Graham.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Velock.
Yes.
Councilmember Rubio.
Yes.
And I believe Councilmember Brown has not rejoined the meeting.
Still here.
Still here. Sorry, sir. How do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion to postpone ordinance serial number 2305 to the February 27th regular city council meeting passes unanimously. Councilmember Sullivan, Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, Velock, and Rubio in support. Ms. Holly, I heard the council say some of the questions they had from the first meeting in February they'd like answered, and then we'll talk about the ordinance in committee of the whole. Is that correct, everybody?
yes, understood.
Thank you, thank
I
you.
do have answers to those questions. There were only about 4 questions, so if there are others that council would like me to address, I would encourage them to those your way as well.
Okay, did you understand what she said?
I believe she said
Okay.
if council has questions, they can send those questions to her and she'll get them answered.
Right, she said that there was 4 to start with, so if you have other questions, to make sure you get them to her. Okay. All right, we still have a motion.
Nope, we're good.
We're good?
Yep.
Okay, we're done. Anyway, now we are on to persons to be heard. It's a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. And the first one we have is Miss Eileen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council, Mayor. I represent Wasilla area seniors. My name is Eileen Falkenstein. I did hand out a brochure to Council. This is our new brochure. This is our new plan that we have that we're putting into action. It's
Simon
our
Brown.
Has left.
We are having a new program. It's Wasilla Mid-Valley Adult Day Services. This is for caregivers and for individuals 18 or older that may be experiencing a brain trauma, dementia, Alzheimer's, physical frailty, or a developmental disability. It provides socialization through activities and active engagement with door-to-door transportation, supervision, snacks, and lunch available. It's to help caregivers have some respite time. It also allows for engagement for individuals in need of this service. It accepts private pay, Medicaid choice waiver, and eventually Tri-West Community Care Network for veteran billing. Wasilla seniors are taking applications for this program, and it will be going into effect soon, we hope. We are also going to be begin building our second apartment building. This will be Aspen House. It'll be a 40-unit senior apartment building that will mirror Willow House, and it will be built next door to that property. We're hoping that that will begin sometime in July or August. Again, we're asking to share the love this month and sponsor either a regular meal or a holiday meal for our seniors on campus. The cost for that is $400, $500 for a holiday meal. It can be an individual that sponsors, a group that sponsors, or a business that sponsors. If you're interested in helping in that, you can contact Wasilla Area Seniors and they will make arrangements for that to happen. If you have sponsored in the past, we thank you for your generosity and support in that area. And that's it.
Thank you. And next is Mr. Todd Stafford. Please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name.
Todd Stafford, I wanted to thank the city staff that put all these meetings on YouTube, the other commission meetings, the airport advisory, landscaping. It's really nice as a citizen to be able to access those meetings, even if you can't make it here on those evenings. So I really appreciate all the hard work for those that have put that time in. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Kelly Dow.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. As you probably recall, I was here 3 weeks ago about Lake Lucile Park, and my request was that you please open the gate and plow the road and the parking lot and put up berms. And I'm here to say thank you so very much. The public process works. So I was here on a Monday night, and by Wednesday, I went back. I gave them Tuesday off. I thought that was good. Anyway, by Wednesday, I went and they'd opened the gate. They plowed the driveway, the parking lot. They put up berms where I suggested. The traffic off the lake has been phenomenally reduced. I've seen sign of maybe 1 or 2 snow machines, but nothing else. So the public process worked. There's some tweaking I'd like the gate left open, but you know, we can work on it. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you. And Lake Lucile's a beautiful park, and I'm seeing more people down in that area already. So thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak to the council at this time? Hearing none, we are now at the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, please read the items for approval under the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have regular meeting minutes, January 23rd, 2023. We have 2 introductions, recommended public hearing date of February 27th, 2023. The first is ordinance serial number 2306, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating funds from the general fund balance in the amount of $45,000 for Caterpillar 140M grader repair. Ordinance serial number 2307, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating funds from the general fund balance in the amount of $10,000 and authorizing the transfer of funds within an accounting fund in the amount of $10,000 for the purchase of a trailer. 2 resolutions for approval. First is resolution serial number 2304, accepting a grant from the Department of Education and Early Development in the amount of $1,250 for the continuing education of library staff. Secondly, resolution serial number 2305, authorizing the transfer of funds within an accounting fund in the amount of $78,165 for water repairs. And lastly, 1 AM to approve AM number 2305, confirmation of mayoral appointment of Catherine Cheadle to the Parks and Recreation Commission, seat D, with a term expiration of December 31st, 2025.
Okay. Is there
Madam Mayor, I move the consent agenda.
a second?
Rubeo, second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Rubio to approve the consent agenda as read. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. There's no unfinished business or new business this evening, so we'll directly move to communications. Madam Clerk, please read the title of the item under communication.
Thank you. It's IM number 2303, monthly financial reports for the period ending December 31st, 2022, to include the month-to-date expenditure report, disbursements greater than $10,000, the investment report, quarterly report of businesses receiving a penalty waiver for sales tax, and the auditor's report. And just a note, you did see the Airport Advisory Commission meeting minutes on the agenda January 19th. We weren't able to receive those by the time the packet was due for release, so we'll have those next regular meeting packet.
We are now to audience comments. It's a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Is there anyone present who would like to address the city council? Seeing none, we will close audience comments. We are on to Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just reporting AML Winter Conference next week. Council members Graham, Brown, and Velock are scheduled to attend and will be traveling to Juneau. My office did receive an application for appeal on a short-term rental permit approved by the Planning Commission, and so next regular meeting packet, you'll see the appointment of Hearing Officer Joe Levesque in the case. If you haven't already done so, please get me your annual POFD, Public Official Financial Disclosure Statement. Those are due by March 15th, also for our Planning Commissioners. And then our Council Chambers AV upgrade, our new mics and UPS are on order. Estimated ship date March 26th, so we'll work on getting that equipment installed just as soon as it's received. And we do have next regular meeting February 27th, and then March 1st we have our clerk council budget meetings. Thank you, that's all I have.
Madam Attorney, are you still with us?
I am, Madam Mayor. My only comment would be an apology to council for not being there tonight. We had school closures and other closures here in Anchorage that made it very difficult for me to drive out there, but I will absolutely be there at the next meeting in person.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
No further comments. I look forward to seeing you all in person on the 27th.
Okay. Councilmember Rubio.
I'm looking forward to our next meeting for sure. And I protect children in our community on a daily basis, and I have 4 kids of my own. And the best thing you can do to protect them is your own supervision. Keep that in mind.
Councilmember Velock.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate your comments and your feedback, and just thank you, and that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to thank the audience for being here tonight. Thank you, Michelle, for all your hard work in the last 2 and 3 years on this issue. I do appreciate that council will discuss this further at the next meeting. I think it's really important. We had things sprung on us today that changes the scope of where we may or may not be moving with this particular ordinance, but all input is certainly very, very important. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hate to parrot Councilperson Sullivan Leonard, but participation in city council meetings is what makes things work. Participation in a council meeting is what brought forward this discussion about sexual offenders and potential restrictions and so on and so forth. So, both sides of every issue, deserve a good close look, and the best way to ensure that your side is looked at it is to be here. I'm not saying that my phone doesn't ring 6 or 8 times a week from people calling me from everything from plowing to sexual offenders. You're certainly welcome to call me at any time, and I certainly look into that. But having your case stated here in front of the entire council is a great way to make sure that the impact that you want makes that. So thank you for being here. Whether you're representing an organization or representing yourself, it does make a tremendous difference. And speaking of phone calls and plowing and things like that, I know I believe it's Big Dipper Construction plows my street, and I probably get, in the past, we've had a pretty heavy snow year. I mean, I was probably getting 6 or 8 phone calls a week about plowing in different areas and so on and so forth. But in the areas that Big Dipper has handled, he's done an exceptional job. And I just wanted to speak up. I mean, this has been a tough year for snow, and I just wanted to make sure that our contractors and our Public Works Department are recognized for keeping up with that, because it makes a heck of a difference to our people. I kind of laugh when they say, well, Anchorage schools are closed, but Matsu schools are open. And that's because, here in Wasilla, we're plowing our streets. Our school buses can travel safely. We have, when they travel, they can travel safely. But thank you to Public Works and to Big Dipper Construction for doing that. And thank you, Kelly, for bringing forward the issues with Lake Lucile Park there, and not just saying, hey, there's a problem, but coming up with a solution. Obviously, Parks and Rec was able to, or not Parks and Rec, but Public Works and Parks and Rec working together, were able to come up with a solution that worked for the city and worked for you. And once again, the power of the podium works great there. And also, earlier today, in the beginning of the council meeting, Gina Rotako was here. She was sitting over on this side. But Gina is a fairly new employee of Senator Wilson's, a part-time employee. Gina has worked for the governor before, is an experienced in legislative matters as well as administrative matters. So she wanted to say something about making sure that get a hold of her if you had issues for Senator Wilson, but she didn't have time to stay past our somewhat lengthy discussion of an earlier thing. So anyway, if you call Senator Wilson's office here locally, you may get referred to Gina, and she was here today to introduce herself. I'm sorry she had to leave, but thank everybody for their discussion today. It's always interesting, and believe it or not, Holly, I think the world of you. You'd never know from the way that we talk at these meetings here, but you're doing a great job, and I appreciate your perspective. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you guys for all coming out. And Kelly, I did get a phone call about opening the gate. They didn't want it open because people was driving in and was breaking into houses down there. So,
Actually, the other side, but okay.
Okay, how do you weigh out? Everything is you're having a balance. So,
Indeed. Thank you, Mayor.
absolutely. But anyway, and our roads crew, they've done an exceptional job. We've got 1 grader down, and I understand that Big Dipper's got 4 down. So, having said that, we are moving. We are Wasilla, we are open, and we are moving. So, to this sex offender thing, we all want to protect our kids. And it don't matter if they're blood kids or they're our neighborhood kids, they're kids. And that's the greatest thing that we can do. But we've also got to make sure in trying to protect these kids that we don't violate somebody's constitutional rights. And so again, back to the balance, you know, and we'll figure it out. It's just gonna take a while, you know. I have 4 kids, 9 grandkids, and 2 greats, so it's all about taking care of kids, family, and all that. That's what Wasilla's about. That's the reason we are the community that we are, is because we do, I feel like we look out for one another. So, with that, there's no further business at hand. I'm adjourning the meeting unless objection is raised. Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned at 7:50 p.m.